Okay, I hope that works out and I can get started.
Yes, we can see your slide. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one big objective in European climate policies, and this is to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. So this means, on balance, we shouldn't add any more CO2 to the atmosphere. And this is what counts, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. So for this, first and foremost, we need to reduce our emissions significantly and rapidly. But we will always have emissions in the system. So this means we also need to get better, to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere, store it in our soils, in our forests, in the products that we make out of it, like wooden buildings, and a certain share of that CO2 will also need to put back in the empty gas fields, oil fields of the North Sea, where we've initially taken the carbon from. And you could say there are three keys to unlock climate neutrality. The first one is renewable energy, and we are there on a very good path. So we are quite confident that we can reach by 2040, 2050, 80-90% renewable energy in our energy mix. And we've seen quite a significant increase in investments also after the start of the war in Ukraine. But we'll always need carbon in the economy, in the industry. That's important to keep in mind. We'll need carbon in the chemical industry. We'll need carbon in the construction sector. But it's just that we shouldn't use or must not use anymore fossil carbon, but we'll need to change to biogenic carbon or to carbon that we capture directly out of the air. And then we need to use that carbon much more sustainably. So it's a lot about circular economy. We need much longer value chains. So by using wood, timber as construction material, and then maybe once we've demolished a building and incinerated the timber, not letting the CO2 go back to the atmosphere, but catch it, capture it, and then maybe produce bioplastics out of it, and so on. So we'll need to see their new value chains. But what is important is we'll need more biogenic carbon. So and there we come to the bioeconomy. There we come to agriculture and forestry. The demands on our land will just increase in a climate neutral economy. It's about the production of food, feed. We'll still need bioenergy. We'll still need biogenic carbon to produce fuels. But it's increasingly the feedstocks for the chemical industry, for the construction sector. So the bioeconomy will be one of the drivers of a climate neutral economy. There we should see a lot of growth, a lot of innovation. So it's very exciting. And for me, it's a very positive story. It's not a declining sector. We'll have probably too much demand for what our land can deliver. It's about setting the right prices now. It's about making us ready for a healthy, resilient agriculture forestry in 2040, 2050. So we'll need to address the challenges that climate change is posing for the sector. We'll need new business models so that our farmers can do a better job, that it will become a more attractive job, that rural regions will become more attractive. They will have a new rural deal there and can energize the rural economies. So just to quantify a bit, to give you some numbers on how that would look like in 2040, we've proposed as Commission a 90% net emission reduction target for 2040. So this means that in total we would have around 800, 900 million tons of emissions. And there, it's already very important to note that out of that, only 160 million tons would come from industry. So we would have done a lot for the decarbonization of industry. And the biggest source of emissions in 2040 would be agriculture from fertilizer and livestock. So we estimate around 300 million tons. So that's down by about 25% of the current 400 million tons. So, but on the other hand, of course, forestry, agriculture can deliver carbon removals, can be a big solution to the challenges of climate change. So we estimate that around 400 million tons of CO2 can be captured and stored in 2040. So, and out of that, around 320, 350 million tons would come from net removals in our soils, in our forests, that we call the LULUCF sector. The remaining 50, 80 million tons would come from technological solutions, like, for example, biochar or bioenergy with CCS. So, but again, there, the biomass would come from agriculture, from forestry. So, and here you see, I think, very well the importance of agriculture, forestry, the bioeconomy in a climate neutral economy. So how do we get there? And we from Climate Action, we've always put a lot of emphasis on the numbers. What is not measured will not get be done. So everything what we've done in other sectors like energy, industry, and we've extended now the emission trading system to road transport and buildings, we've always started from the monitoring, reporting, verification. You need reliable, credible numbers so that you then can set the right financial incentives based on them. And this is also the approach that we are taking now for agriculture and forestry. We are starting with the certification framework for carbon removals and carbon farming. And we want to get better at delivering the data that we need for these new value chains in the bioeconomy, and to give better, more credible data to farmers, to the other actors in the forestry and food supply chains, and then have good financial incentives there and reward those that go forward on that transition to a more sustainable bioeconomy. So, and first and foremost, of course, we need to reduce our soil emissions. We've depleted our soils. We haven't treated them very well over the last decade. So here we need to get better, for example, through the more efficient use of fertilizers. And there we are in the whole nitrogen debate and so on. And we'll develop a methodology here how we can measure the reduction of fertilizer emissions. So possibly focusing on the nitrogen excess that we have in several member states, in several regions. So it would be really looking on a win-win solution. Better use of nitrogen and fertilizers, reducing the leakage of nitrogen that we have is good for the farmers, it's good for the environment. Then the other big challenge here is the rewetting of peatlands. It's the largest source of emissions that we have from land in Europe. We also here developing a methodology. It's a challenging one then to implement because it assumes quite a large change in the use of the land, but it's a very important one. And we need to find the right combination between the incentives that we can get through carbon credits as well as transition funding, possibly from the Common Agricultural Policy. Then, as also the minister said, we need to look into the sequestration, in the carbon removals, in our soils, in our forests. So agroforestry, of course, is there a bigger topic for us. The planting of hedges, not only good for climate, but also for biodiversity, for climate adaptation, for water management. And then finally, co-legislators also want us to develop a first pilot methodology for the reduction of livestock emissions. we should have that ready by 26 and then decide whether we can also include the reduction of livestock emissions in the framework. So by 26, we should be ready with all the methodologies that we need for on-farm monitoring, for providing farmers with better data, but also with credible indicators on which financial incentives can be based. So how does the overall certification framework look like? So we've agreed to the framework with the Parliament and our member states, and it sets out 4 quality criteria, which are very similar to what you find also in private certification schemes on the voluntary carbon market. You need credible quantification, you need additionality, so you want to have additional emission reductions, additional removals. You want the operators, the farmers, also to be liable for keeping the carbon in. And we put a lot of emphasis on sustainability. So this has been a big topic and a big request, both by Parliament and member states, that our certification should also cover sustainability. So everything we do, like agroforestry, cover crops, and so on, that should also have positive benefits for biodiversity, for soil quality. And it does. So whatever we will certify under this framework, any carbon removal, any emission reduction should be sustainable, should have benefits for biodiversity, for soil quality. So, and I think we can deliver that, and we'll emphasize that a lot. And of course, we would hope that this then also leads to higher prices at which these certificates can be traded. We are already very busy in developing the concrete methodologies together with an expert group. We are getting more and more positive feedback on our work. That's very important for us. We want to be very inclusive. We want to build very much on the existing knowledge and expertise. So then how would the certification process itself look like? So we want to welcome all existing private and public certification schemes, that they join then our European framework. We have the initiatives like in France, the Label Bas Carbone. We have quite a successful forestry certification scheme in Spain, but then also what you are doing there in Ireland. We all want to welcome you then in our European scheme, and we are open to private and public certification schemes. And of course, then what we put a lot of emphasis on is that we have independent certification bodies, as we know it from the emission trading system, or as we know it from the certification of sustainable biofuels. And what is very important is that we will allow group audits. So it's not the single farmer that will apply with a certification scheme, but mostly, and what we already see from the practice currently, it will be a group of farmers that come together and then join the certification schemes. And there you can save a lot in administrative costs. You can distribute much better the costs of soil sampling and so on. And of course, also in terms of the knowledge exchange between farmers, that's a great opportunity, because I think there's no better way than to learn from the neighbor, where you can see, okay, these practices really work and really give me a better soil and can give me also additional income. And then we are now also very busy in establishing a union-wide registry. So this was also a very big demand by member states and the Parliament. We will create a unique registry for Europe, where we then can see all the results of the different certification schemes, farmer groups from all over Europe. And it will be very transparent. You will have access to the audit reports, to the certificate of compliance, where you will have all information about carbon, but also about biodiversity indicators and so on. So this is something we are very actively discussing with the expert group now. And then, of course, you will have all the certified units, so the credits that then can be traded. And we will make a big difference between, okay, what is a removal unit, what is an emission reduction unit. So there we will also provide a lot of transparency. And I think what is important to say, and I know there's always a bit of uncertainty with all the discussions under the Paris Agreement, international trade, maybe corresponding adjustments. Do I have then to reduce or deduct these carbon credits maybe from the national inventories? So will the member states not be able to see all the good work in the national inventories? We've been very clear on this. Whatever is sold here in this registry does not need to be deducted from the national inventories. So you will both see the benefit at the farmers level as well as at the national level. So, and how can then these certificates be used? So, of course, in the first place, now we want to support all private initiatives in the voluntary carbon market, all these food processors that are already very much looking into their scope 3 emissions. And we hope that we can be there helpful, creating more transparency, making it easier to finance farmers, in particular for sustainable finance. This is what we hear a lot from banks, from private investors. They want to see credible performance indicators that we can deliver with our certification. And then, of course, we are also looking towards our post-2030 climate policy. So the next commission here in Brussels need to think about, okay, how does our climate policy go forward? What do we do with our targets in LULUCF, in the effort sharing regulation? Could it make sense that also for the agri-food supply chain, we think more about a trading system, about sustainability standards? And we have a study ongoing, which we kicked off indeed yesterday with a big event here in Brussels, where we look into how could a more regulated trading system look like? What are the impacts on the farmer's income? Could we strengthen the market position of farmers within the supply chain when we create kind of a second market for ecosystem services, for carbon removals, for emission reductions, so that we would give a very clear indication, okay, we want to reduce agriculture emissions in Europe by 35% until 2040, 2050. And then those farmers that want to transition to more sustainable agriculture could earn additional money by selling credits on that market. So both on the development of the methodologies that we do in the expert group, as well as in the policy thinking, what can we do after 2030 to provide more certainty, better incentives in the agri-food supply chain? Very much looking forward to your contributions, building on your experience, building on all the great work that you're already doing. And thanks so much for your attention.